Good morning, Chair Postman, member of Allendorf, staff and guests. The lobbies are open and the recording has begun.
Thanks, Justin. Good morning, everybody. We'll convene the board caucus meeting for August 1st, 2023. Member Garrett's on leave. Our first agenda item is a policy and rules team update and board meeting prep. Cassidy West, the policy and rules manager, will kick us off, I think. Good morning.
Hello. Good morning. Good morning, Chair Postman and board member Vollendorf. I'll start with the cannabis updates for 5367. That is still on track with public comments being accepted until August 7th. For cannabis sampling, we had the survey that closed on Sunday, and that was July 30th. And I am very pleased with the response rate. We received over 300 responses, and so that's really great. And so because of the overwhelming response rate, I'm going to be pushing the CR 102 back to October, and we'll be presenting that with the 5367 102. And previously, sampling had tentatively been planned to be presented in September. And in terms of the liquor legislation, the liquor updates, private club memberships is on track with the CR 103 to be tentatively presented to the board on August 16th. We're accepting public comments on the combined 5448 and Mass 13 project until August 21st. And then Daniel tentatively plans to bring the CR 102 to the board on September 13th for the public hearing to be held in October. And then today, Daniel will be providing a brief overview of the CR 102 for the 2023 liquor legislative implementation that he'll be presenting at tomorrow's board meeting. And so I'll pass it along to Daniel in case unless there are any questions.
No questions. Thank you. Okay, you're up, Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Chair Postman and member Vollendorf. This morning, I'll be previewing the CR 102 rule proposal on the 2023 liquor legislation implementation that I'm going to be presenting for approval during tomorrow's board meeting. We're not proposing any new rules at this time. We're only making amendments to two existing rules. And these two changes are only technical in nature. And of the three pieces of legislation that this project encompasses, the rule changes actually only relate to one of those laws. So just to recap, this project started with approval of the CR 101 on May 24. Excuse me. And the three laws at issue here are House Bill 1730, engrossed substitute House Bill 1731, and House Bill 1772. 1730 expands the type of jobs that 18 to 20-year-olds can perform in establishments that sell alcohol, and now allowing these adults to work at the back of the house roles where they don't interact with customers or alcohol. 1731 creates a new permit for owners of short-term rental units, think Airbnb and Vrbo, and allows those folks to give free bottles of wine, one free bottle of wine per booking, as long as a series of conditions are met. Lastly, 1772 prohibits the manufacture or sale of products that combine alcohol and cannabis. After the CR 101 was filed in May, public comment was open until June 26th, but we didn't receive any. During collaborative internal stakeholdering, only 1731, which is the Airbnb permit law, requires the agency to do rulemaking. 1731, as I mentioned, it creates the permit for Airbnb operators, but additionally, it allows these folks to obtain wine directly from wine distributors. And so, in addition to creating this permit, 1731 also changed the statutory language about wine distributors, saying basically that in addition to the retailers that they can sell wine to, they can also sell wine to these new permit holders. But similarly, we have two regulations on the books about wine distributors and defining who they can sell wine to. For anyone who's interested, those are WAC, or Washington Administrative Code 314-24-180 and 314-24-190. But those two regulations need to be changed to reflect this new language and basically say that, as I just said, now wine distributors can sell wine directly to permit holders. We don't know how frequently this is going to be used, but in order to align the rule language with the new statutory language, we have to change these rules. While the rules team looked at 1730, which is the one about the 18 to 20-year-olds, and 1772, which is about combining alcohol and cannabis, we determined that the language of those is pretty specific, such that we don't need to do extra rulemaking. And as a general principle, if we don't need to do extra rulemaking or we don't need to be changing rules, we're not going to do so. I may have mentioned, or I did mention during my presentation of the 101, that 1731, again, the Airbnb law, states that someone needs to be present to verify the ID that the folks renting it are over 21. But just like I mentioned on the other two laws, this language is pretty specific. And again, rather than risk muddying the waters with adding rulemaking that might sort of, again, like I said, muddy the waters or sort of create ambiguity with the statute, we figured let's just let the statutory language stand as it is. When I initially presented the 101, I sort of planned out the tentative schedule, and I said I anticipated the public hearing on these rules happening at the end of September. That was under the assumption that we would be doing a little bit more rulemaking and changes than we actually are. So given the relatively minor changes that we're proposing here, I'm moving up the schedule a little bit. I think we can get this done a little bit quicker than initially anticipated. So as things currently stand, if the CR 102 is approved tomorrow, public comment's going to be open on these rules till September 13, when I plan on holding the public hearing, which would enable us to complete the rulemaking by September 27th, and then the rule changes would be in effect by Halloween. And thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
The question that I, may not really be for you, but this is the first I understood that the wine for the short-term rental can come from the distributor, but it's only that. That's the only part that's changing in the distributor relationship, right? We're all just, if you're short-term rental, you can buy directly from them, but not anybody else, right?
Yeah. So the law specifically says that because 1731, it creates a new permit in our statute on permits. As folks in the liquor industry might know, we have lots of permits, and now we're going to have one more. But in addition to doing that, it also says, hey, wine distributors, the statute on wine distributors says you can sell to retailers, you can sell to other wine folks, and now you can also sell to the folks who have this very specific Airbnb permit. And so because it says that now in the statute, our rules, which also talk about who wine distributors can sell to, we have to change that language too.
So
otherwise
we'll
there'd be a conflict.
Keep track of how many people take advantage of this because they need to get a permit, right?
That's a great question. So the law currently, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit in more detail tomorrow, but the law currently requires wine distributors to already track who they're selling bottles to. They need to have those logs for audit purposes. And while typically wine distributors are selling to stores, to other folks that aren't these Airbnb permit holders, those logs that are subject to audits will presumably now include Airbnb permit holders. And I was going to talk about this more tomorrow, but part of the public comment, because we did receive one public comment on the proposed rules, and that public comment basically said, hey, maybe we should track how much this Airbnb permit's being used, because and this is also something that's going to get into tomorrow, but it's not so clear how many Airbnb operators are going to take advantage of this permit, just because a lot of the rules are pretty onerous, and these are the rules in statute. To be clear, we're not making these rules; the legislature did. So just to be clear, if folks are upset about all the additional rules, it's not us. But in order to sort of use these permits, you have to verify the ID, you have to warn folks about public consumption. And one of the suggestions was, well, why don't we also have some sort of tracking for how many bottles are sold? Or how, another part of the suggestion was maybe a log of folks who do accept it, because part of it is also that the operators have to provide advance notice to folks who are renting. So if you rent an Airbnb and the person who has the Airbnb owns it is going to provide you a free bottle of wine, they have to tell you ahead of time, hey, just as a heads up, there's going to be a free bottle of wine there. And that's because the statute also requires that the person renting the unit have an opportunity to be like, you know what, I'm bringing a toddler, or for whatever reason, I don't want the bottle of wine, so that they have an opportunity to say no. But in order for them to say no, they have to know ahead of time. And so the proposal from the rule comment, the only comment we received on this so far is, let's have a log. Let's have something where folks who are accepting bottles of wine put their name down and sign and date it. We ended up not accepting this proposal for a few different reasons, but one of which being privacy concerns, which is, hey, I don't know that folks who are renting Airbnbs and want to get a bottle of wine are going to want to sign their name and date it. That just feels a little official. And then secondly, if we do have these logs of names and dates, that might raise public record concern. It's not so clear that if there's a public record request that we'd be able to exempt the names and dates and logs. It just kind of gets down a rabbit hole that at this time, and especially because we actually don't know how many folks are going to take advantage of the permit, which gets into my next point, which is that the LCB plans on a year or maybe a year and a half after this permit goes live, we plan on doing a retrospective look back to be like, how many folks are actually using this permit? There are probably tens of thousands of folks in the state with Airbnbs and Verbos. I keep saying Airbnb, but it's other rental units. So we plan on doing a look back to see just how many of these folks are using the permit. And then the other part is that just because they can obtain wine directly from the distributor doesn't mean they have to. It may be easier for them to go to a retailer and get 6 bottles of wine at the store. And it may not be advantageous to the wine distributor either. If it's like, I don't know that it's worth it for them to sell 6 bottles of wine to Joe Schmo Airbnb rental operator versus some sort of bigger business. So there's just a few different factors going on here, but either way, LCB is planning on doing a look back in a year or so from now just to see what this looks like. And sort of on that last point, just because we're not doing rulemaking on the other laws right now doesn't mean that we can't do it later. If it turns out in a year or two from now, we do a retrospective look back and we're like, hey, these X, Y, and Z issues coming up, we can do rulemaking then. It's just that the way the statutory language is right now and the way that things are looking on the ground, we don't know that we need to shake things up a whole lot right now.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay. Well, we'll see.
No problem. And I'll go into more detail about this tomorrow. Obviously, let me know if there are any questions.
Great. We'll do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. That brings us to board member and executive assistant reports. Anything from your desk, Dustin?
Not today. Thank you, Chair.
Jim?
Nothing.
Not for me either. Okay, we will adjourn the caucus for August 1st. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for a board meeting and the item that Daniel just talked about, as well as some other things. So see you then, and we're adjourned. Have a good day.
Thank you.
See you later.